Welcome to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. It's Tuesday, first day of the last month of 2009. Tell me this year didn't go fast. I guess everybody has their turkey hangovers. Getting ready for the Christmas. We have a few items today that also includes items that were not taken up because we needed to continue those items from last session, given our intense discussion on a subject known as medical marijuana. That being said, we do have one guest with us today who is being considered for the Central Area Planning Commission. I had the pleasure of meeting with him a few minutes ago. I'd like to ask him to come to the microphone. Mr. Justin J. Kim, are you here, sir? Mr. Kim is a resident of Council District 10. He's also a graduate of Accounting and Real Estate Finance from USC. And member of the Urban Land Institute. Welcome, Mr. Kim.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And if you just speak into the microphone, we'll be able to hear you better.
Okay.
Can you give us a little bit more about your background? I already gave you a nice introduction of some of your academic achievements.
Again, my name is Justin Kim. I graduated from USC about 20 years ago. Ever since then, I've been a commercial appraiser. So my background is, again, valuation. I've been involved also as a disabled access commissioner for the past 4 years. I also was the president. So I know the needs of the community and also the business. And again, I like to contribute.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Let me ask you, in participating in this effort, in this commission, what would you like to see happen, and what would you like to leave with once you're gone?
I believe in principle of balance. Means, again, as a real estate valuation expert, to sustain growth for the city, again, you need the business needs, also you need the community needs. Again, the background is a sustained growth. Again, I like to see maintaining value of real estate values in LA. In order to facilitate that, you need the parks, you need the affordable housing, again, you need the shopping center. Again, the key is the balance, I believe. And I like to contribute with my knowledge, my experience for the 20 years, somehow, what's going on with the city.
When we talk about affordable housing, how important is it from your point of view when it comes to the city's growth?
It's very, very, very important. Especially what's going on with the central LA, with all the new developments. We need housing needs in the immediate epicenter. Again, that comes with the transportation and the time. And with the transportation, again, you have a very good working people who have additional time to work or to play or to participate. So having affordable housing is part of the equation for sustained growth in the future.
So if a developer comes to the commission and wants to build 100 units, of those 100 units, how much, or what would be the percentage in your mind? And I know I've asked you this question before.
I don't think that's, okay, excuse me. My personal opinion is, again, for sustained growth in property values, for a community to grow, about 30%. 30%, my personal opinion.
Right.
Only then the community forms, only then I think the value increase consistently.
I wish I would have known you 6 years ago when we were talking about the housing policy then, but I appreciate your presence. I appreciate what you offer to the city. As a citizen who has done very well in your academics and achieved many goals as an immigrant, you should be complimented, and I thank you for giving back to this great city. With that, I'd like to ask Councilmember Zion if you had any other questions or comments for Mr. Kim.
Thank you. Mr. Chair. The needs of the community, you mentioned that a number of times.
Yes.
In this committee, developments throughout the city, sometimes big, sometimes small. And it seems that some people don't get the message that we need to provide housing for our public safety personnel, for our teachers, for people who don't make $100,000+ a year.
Sure.
Quality housing in a nice neighborhood, and you can probably find housing in an undesirable neighborhood at an affordable price. The problem is the schools aren't academically achieving any significant goals. The neighborhoods have fear and concern. So how, as a commissioner, are you going to emphasize to the developers the need to provide not Section 8 housing, not homeless housing, but housing for people who are working, providing the service to the people of Los Angeles, to encourage them? And I'm learning this on this committee, that a lot of developers don't really care about that unless they get some kind of incentive as a bonus here, or senior housing is another component, which we don't have enough senior housing. How would you as a commissioner emphasize to developers what we as a city need to provide that quality housing in quality neighborhoods? This isn't Beverly Hills where you have quality throughout the community, or some of the small municipalities. We have a mixed 15 districts, and it runs from one scale to the other. So how do we convince those developers, not out of greed, but out of good conscience, to do something to help the working class of society?
Again, the key is balance. I guess the key is, again, sustained growth. I know the developer's point of view is, again, they want to make the money. But in order to make money long time, okay, continuously, again, you have to have a balance with affordable housing component. Only then the community moves forward. Again, you develop a project, or you may say you want to hit and run. Okay, you may make the money now. Okay, maybe it could be long-term money or short-term money. Okay, but
then they go to their gated community, and they're in a safe environment, and the other folks don't have that same opportunity, and that's what the concern that we see is, that we don't see that shared.
In my views, again, I know profit, business, very important, but you really have to care about the community, and you really have to, again, care about the sustained growth and make sure everything is in balance. Okay. And that's what I'm going to bring to once I become a commissioner. So to make sure that we're on a more about central level, such a way that it has to be sound planning. Okay, it's not only one project. Okay, it will be a continual growth for the city of LA.
Because there's been moves in the past to have inclusionary housing, to have specific mandates. You mentioned 30%. A lot of people say we won't develop in the city if we have to provide 30% workforce housing. Well, maybe we will find people who will do that, so we can turn those negative areas into positive areas.
Sure. Again, my personal opinion, again, 30% again, is, again, in order for the community to succeed, we need population. We also need, much as a high-income individual, we also need low-income individuals, moderate income, in order to, again, to have balance for a city or the community to grow for the future.
Because just because someone's working at a salary of $40,000 or $50,000 a year with a wife and 2 children, which is a very little amount of money to survive, we need to consider those folks who want to live in a nice environment and somehow provide for that.
I think it's part of a total equation. Okay. Again, there are certain needs. Okay, with the low to moderate income, high income individuals. But again, it has to be, again, planned, such that, again, developers have to give some, I guess city has to give some, but we just have to make sure that we're on the same path as in one. Again, that's why I believe in, again, sustained growth with balance.
Now, I want to commend Mr. Reyes, because he's been very aggressive in this arena to try and bring about some change. And the option, if it doesn't happen, is inclusionary housing. When there's a mandate that it be done, instead of somewhat of good conscience to try and do something right for the rest of the city residents.
Thank you, Mr. Zinn. Thank you, sir. Mr. Kim, I'd like to move that we recommend it to the commission, and that would be my motion. We have a second?
Second that.
So we will be asking you to come before the council. And what date is it scheduled for? December 8th. And hopefully there's some forms that go along with the different departments. So we want to make sure that you are already informed of all the paperwork that's needed to be done with the Ethics Commission.
Okay.
So with that, we recommend you, and you have been approved by this committee, and look forward to seeing you in the council on December 8th. So thank you very much, Mr. Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you for your support. With that, we do have with us Director of Planning Department. And Gail, before we start, I did want to, I'll probably be writing a letter as a chair of this committee to the department, asking that as the department initiates negotiations with the different developers as they come through the process, that we do suggest, we do put ourselves in a place where we can be opportunistic in offering the various opportunities for creating workforce housing. So by the time it comes to committee, it's not like a surprise. Because I do know there's negotiations going on now between council offices and developers. I know there are different mechanisms. There's different levels of comfort. I mean, every developer has their own personality. Every attorney has their own opinion as to how they should posture themselves in that goal. But I think if we're going to be competitive, we need to have a workforce that has housing. In this international market, we have to have a workforce that, you know, we've been using that term, jobs housing balance, since the 70s. We have yet to achieve that balance. But that would be something that I would assert, and that's a letter be coming from the chair of this committee.
Let me share with you that most of the recent conversations that I have had with development organizations and with the BIA leads me to believe that they have a clear understanding that the market is changing and that the new financial markets are going to require that developers prepare and put on the market a different product than the past, and I am getting more of a sense of developers looking at a more affordable product, smaller products that folks will be able to get financing for. I think that as bad as the financial situation is, one of the consequences will be more affordable product being built, and I think that that bodes well for us in the future. So I think the development community is thinking about that.
Right. But for the sake of formality, there'll be a letter from my
absolutely.
office as chair of this committee to make sure that that has been
we will certainly
memorialized, right?
Yes.
And hopefully it takes on another level of
right.
Of weight, if you will.
We will be happy to make sure that they understand what your expectations are.
Thank you, Ms. Goldberg, and it's a good time to hear from your report. It's been a while, so welcome.
Well, thank you. I did want to share with you that recently I attended the annual meeting of the Big City Planning Directors. Every year, the American Planning Association and the Lincoln Institute invite the planning directors from the 30 largest cities to gather in Cambridge for 3 days, and each year we have a specific topic, and our topic this year was housing. And so it was very interesting, and maybe at another meeting we could spend more time, but it was really interesting to hear the perspective of other large cities, some who share our problems and some who have a very different kind of problem, but how it is that all of those cities are trying to provide housing right now in these difficult economic times. We had an opportunity to meet with Elizabeth Wilkins, the Policy Assistant for Urban Affairs.
Let's go back to me. Just interrupt for a second. We have folks in the audience having conversations. If you need to have your conversations, please take them outside so Ms. Goldberg can be heard. Thank you very much.
We met with Elizabeth Wilkins, who's the policy assistant for the White House Office of Urban Affairs. We met with the new deputy administrator for the Federal Transit Administration, Teresa McMillan, and we also met with Tim Torma, the senior policy analyst for EPA's Smart Growth Office, again talking about the issues of housing. And I will tell you, one of the things that we heard from all of the different agencies was a sense of cooperation at the federal level that has never existed before between HUD and housing, between transit from DOT, and from the EPA. I was also given assurances, as all of the planning directors were, that there is also a new sense of the importance of planning for the housing and the infrastructure that we need to accomplish across the nation, and that there is an expectation that as we move forward in the next year or so, that there will be federal money available for planning. And I certainly pointed out, as many of the planning directors did, that it's important for us to not have a lot of catches to the money, because the matching is going to be difficult for most of the cities. We also spent a good deal of time talking about the budget problems that each of the cities are having and how it is that planning departments are responding in terms of reorganizing their departments, restructuring government, if you will, how they are reorganizing in terms of city functions, and that was a very interesting discussion for all of us to have. At some point, when we have more time, perhaps I could go into more detail about what is happening at the other large cities and how they are reacting to some of the same crises that we are facing here. I will share with you that I think I had mentioned to you in the past that we anticipated in the planning department that of the 91 members of our staff that qualify for early retirement, that we had anticipated about a third of them, that 30 people would sign up. The number actually is 41. Wow. And that is going to require in the planning department a major restructuring of our department. We are losing entire classifications of managers, so it will certainly flatten the organization, but we will be spending time over the next few weeks and months thinking about how we are going to reorganize around the remaining staff. I think I had told you before that a year ago we had 400 authorized positions in the planning department, many vacancies, but 400 authorized positions with a work program that matched that 400 people. When you take out now the 40 people who are leaving and you account for the loss of capacity because we have 244 people on 10% furlough and we have another probably 100 people on something a little less than a 5% work reduction, we are going to be down 44% in terms of the capacity of the department. From 400, our new capacity will be closer to 230 people.
But that begs the question, what are going to be priorities of the planning department? Are we going to be focused on this imbalance of the city?
Yes.
Or are we going to be looking at revenue generating activity, or are we going to be looking at fulfilling community plans and embracing the neighborhood councils and all the work that entails?
Right.
So there's quite a few decisions we have to make.
Well, the important thing to remember is that before these changes, 75% of our staff did case processing, and that we must continue doing. We only had about 40 people working on long-range planning with all of the policy development that we were doing and the community plans. So this is going to require a major restructuring, and it will limit the amount of policy work that we can do with our current capacity. But we are working at finding ways to gain capacity without putting new people on the payroll. We are going for grants that allow us to hire consultants to do work instead of us. We are working with the universities to create a year-round internship program with graduate students
Right.
that will help us to do community plan work.
Well-
So we are looking at every creative way we can to increase our capacity.
Well, Director Goldberg, as chair of this committee and working with the council, I'm looking forward to working with the mayor and his staff to speak to what direction and priorities we're going to be setting. And we hear from the mayor's office. Would you like to comment on this, or want to reserve that for later? Okay, don't want to put you on the spot, but it is a big concern. As executive of the city, the mayor has to make some choices, and has the power to hire and fire department heads, and that comes with a lot of political issues. But at the same time, there's 15 council members who need their districts to be planned, and so how we achieve that balance is going to be a very critical process. So I look forward to that conversation, and hopefully meeting with the mayor and his staff about how we engage this very critical issue.
Yeah, and let me assure you that in the planning department, we clearly understand the need of the elected officials to solve the problems in their communities and get the appropriate help they need from the planning department. So we're certainly aware of this, and this is certainly a major concern and consideration as we move
not an easy
forward.
task.
Yeah,
So thank you,
thank you.
Director Goldberg. That being said, we can go through the agenda, and there are some items that are being continued, some items that we could put on consent, others we can adopt, but there are folks who have submitted their cards for public comment, and I want to pull those out first just to let you know what is being considered for that item. For example, item number 2, it's been continued for a future date, yet we have 1, 2, 3 cards on that item, and I'd like to ask the 3 individuals if they'd like to hold their time until it comes to committee and it's actually scheduled and be heard, or would you like to speak now? You'll hold your time until it comes before us. So that's Ms. Barbara Monahan-Burr. Anthony Alden, would you like to hold your time until it comes forward? Okay, and Jacqueline Kerr? Okay, ma'am, so we'll make sure that your names have been read into the record, and item 2 has been continued for a future date. The other item that has a card, we don't have a future date yet. And so once we get that date, it'll be announced according to all the rules. And number 9 has 2 cards, and I'd just like to let you know that that one we'd like to put on consent with revised conditions. So, Ms. Weitzer, do you still feel compelled to speak? Okay, and Mike Buehler, do you still feel compelled to speak? You do, then we'll have to hold on to that. So we call that special. And that's item number 9, but it is scheduled for consent.
Bless you.
And the other item has cards. It was item 11, that's been called special, we'll hold that. And item 12 has been continued for 6 months, and we do have several cards on this with Daniel Wright, Ziggy Cruz, Doug Haynes, Aaron Epstein, and Richard H. Plotkin. If you feel compelled to speak, can you raise your hand? You do? Okay, so it'll be continued for 6 months, but they do want to speak on that item. Then going back to our next items that do not have speaker cards. Number 3, we can adopt. Number 4, we can move on consent. Number 5 on consent.
You're going too fast.
Come on, Dennis.
Trying to catch
Si
up.
se puede.
Trying to catch up. Okay.
What item are you on now?
And at 5.
Okay. Item 6 will continue to plumb January 12th in council for January 27th. Number 7, we can move on consent. Number 8 on consent. Number 9, we have a speaker card, but that one should have moved on consent with revised conditions. Number 10 is continued to February 23, 2010, and council March 10th. 11 is special. You have Rex Frankel to speak on that one. And 12, continue for 6 months. We do have people who have some other cards. So Roberto, can I go back to the one that we need to get to?
I believe the next item, Councilman, will be item 9, the project on CD4. It's a general plan amendment and a vesting zone change.
Can we just get a quick summary from the staff on this item? And then we'll hear from Mr. Buehler.
Good afternoon, Chairman Reyes, members of the committee. My name is Henry Chu. This item was presented before you 2 weeks ago, and at the committee's request, you had asked the applicant to look into workforce housing, and I believe the applicant has submitted some conditions, and staff is available for any questions.
And I want to thank you for your consideration, your cooperation. I want to thank the council office. I think it is a great statement to be made, and I truly appreciate your efforts. We have Mr. Mike Buehler.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Mike Buehler. I'm Director of Advocacy for the Los Angeles Conservancy. And I did address this matter at your last hearing, but I would like to clarify a point that was raised by one of the speakers at the last hearing. It was stated that the California Register nomination that was submitted by the Conservancy may not be heard for up to a year from now. I just wanted to submit in the record today a letter from the State Office of Historic Preservation that I received yesterday, confirming that the nomination regarding the building's significance will be heard by the State Historical Resources Commission on January 29th next year.
Thank you very much, sir. Next speaker, we have Dale Goldsmith.
Good afternoon, honorable committee members. Dale Goldsmith with the law firm of Armbruster, Goldsmith and Delvac, representing the applicant BRE. I just wanted to thank Renee Weitzer of Councilman Labange's office, as well as this committee, to help focus our project to make it a better project. We're very proud of it, and we look forward to breaking ground sometime, hopefully, in the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldsmith. Thank you very much. Councilman Zahn, thank you for your advocacy.
I just wanted to acknowledge Mark Armbruster and Mr. Labange, who had rather a unique debate with on this particular matter. But I think the result is going to assist the folks that we're talking about, the workforce housing. And I know that 1 week we went over in council and the meeting was canceled, but it gave time to think, consider, and I think it's a reasonable number. We don't want to be greedy, we want to be reasonable. And I think this solution from the developer is of great consideration for the teachers, the police officers, the firefighters, the working class of our society that will have a decent, respectable place and a nice community to live. And that's going to be 14 folks that can be there, and maybe through the urging or the perseverance or the open-heartedness, the compassion to make that happen. I want to express my appreciation, because I know oftentimes when you pencil something out and that's where you're going and then you have to modify it, it's a challenging task. But in the end, this is going to benefit those folks that are going to get those units, as well as enhance that community. So I want to show due acknowledgement for the group coming around to make that decision. So Mark, I know you worked on this tirelessly, and you got a few more gray hairs out of it, but it's well worth it for the community, so thank you much.
But Councilman Zahn, he has hair, so...
Yes, he does have it. Well, you shouldn't be talking much, Mr. Reyes.
I know. We're both in the same cup of tea here. We're in the same place. Thank you, Ms. Weitzman.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I do want to say that BRE, the company, is one of the greatest companies that you can work with. 3 years we're working with them. There's not one person from the community in opposition to this large project, and they've come out at the end as winners, and I appreciate it. Thank you to both of you.
Okay. Congratulations. I'd like to move approval with conditions as revised.
A second.
Okay.
You may want to instruct planning to make any modifications to the ordinance, Councilman.
Okay, and we shall do that. So plan for revised ordinance as dictated by the revised conditions. Thank you very much, Roberto. Next item.
Next item, Councilman, is an appeal by Rex Franco. He's appealing the decision of the Planning Commission as relates to a track map.
What item?
Item 11, Councilman. It's for a 325-unit apartment building and a 225-unit condo building on 2 lots in CD 11.
Okay, we did close the hearing on this item. So I guess this is the bottom line, and I understand what limitations there are and previous agreements. And is anyone here representing the company? Like to come on up, sir? Please introduce yourself, sir.
Good afternoon, Alan Apshes of Greenberg Traurig, representing the applicant.
Alan Absence.
Apshes.
Abscess?
Apshes.
Abscess. Mr. Abscess, I wanted to, one, I understand that the result of your agreement allows for the transition and the acquisition of a scenario that introduces 225 units of residential condominiums, correct? In Lot 2A?
Yes, that's correct.
And Lot 1 introduces 325 units of apartment buildings.
They're somewhat less, actually, but that was the original application, yes.
That's what it says here in the application. That's what this action will end up creating.
Right.
Would that be accurate?
That's right.
550.
So 550 units, 325...
550 units total. That's correct.
Pardon me?
325 units of apartment and 225 units residential. When you think of our city, sir, and I ask you, I understand this is an agreement that went back to 1986. There's no question about that. And I understand that you stand on very firm legal grounds as to what you're asking for, correct?
I think so, yes, thank you.
My appeal to you, sir, is this. When we look at what is going to be allowed, do you see in any way any kind of flexibility for workforce housing in the 325 units of apartment building or in the 225-unit residential condo, understanding very clearly that there's a 1986 agreement? You do not see any flexibility at all in allowing for affordable and or workforce housing in this scenario?
Well, when you ask about flexibility, and we do see flexibility, we're not opposed to workforce housing or affordable housing or other uses for that matter. And we have, as I mentioned before, last hearing, we anticipate that the development agreement is going to need to be renewed or extended or amended in just 2 short years. And we have already initiated earnest discussions with the council office, which they'll testify to, that we're going to be looking at ways in which we can accommodate various uses, including workforce housing and affordable units, in the context of relooking at what entitlements and lots remain available. So that's what I can tell you we'll do, and that's the commitment we'll make to you.
And that's with future actions.
And it's very likely that before these lots are actually developed, we're going to have those future actions, because the possibility of actually building these units now today is in the current marketplace is not really all that realistic. So we've already begun looking at other uses for these lots. Potentially more housing, workforce housing. We haven't gotten too far in those discussions with the council office, because we just agreed we'll finish this and we'll take up those discussions. But I think the councilman himself will tell you that we're quite serious about that and we're open to that.
But that's for future scenarios.
That's a future scenario, but we're going to undertake that as soon as we're completed with these proceedings.
But this action today does not
We're
commit you to offer that in this scenario.
That's true.
And that's my question to you. Is that something that you could assert and or take back to your client to see if they can find it in their, it's going to sound a little corny, in their heart to offer housing so that people can afford to live in Los Angeles, the very same people that you would hope to hire for the different commercial activity in your amazing project?
Thank you. I understand what you're getting at, but just to be honest with you, in the context of these approvals, the answer to the question is no, not in the context of these approvals.
So there is no heart.
That I don't think that's very fair.
I'm trying to answer. I mean, I'm just answering what you're saying.
It's not a matter of heart or no heart. It's a matter of what investments were made, what agreements were made with the city over the course of many years, what benefits were extended. But as I said,
but there's a state of flux here. As you have said, this was done in 1986.
Yeah.
We have new market conditions. We have a new horizon. There are different opportunities that could arise if the will was there.
And I think the will is best there in the context of an amendment of the development agreement.
In the future.
In the future.
But not now.
Not now.
So we have to wait.
But you'll see us again, because the future is only a few short years away, and we intend to be busy on that right away, because we don't want to have the development agreement run out. We don't want to have these rights run out. We fully expect to. And Chairman Reyes, we have our own interests in looking at other uses for the site, but those other uses are not available under the current agreement. We're restricted down to just two things under the current agreement, and a certain amount of square footage. And the consideration was passed long ago back and forth for that. So,
see, my sense of hope here is that those who would want to build here and actually posture the city to be competitive with a workforce that we can take off the freeways and lower our contamination footprint and ease the traffic and create a much stronger family unit, because families don't have to travel 42 hours a day one way to get to their job. Right. That's something you could create now.
I think we have the message. The basic idea of the project from the time the council authorized it in 2005 was to put housing where jobs were, and that's what we're doing. I understand what you're interested in. I understand what the city's expectation, and I can pretty much assure you
it's not just me. I'm speaking on behalf of the thousands and thousands of people right now looking for a home.
I understand.
That want to work in Los Angeles, and you have that ability right now to create that opportunity. You have it in your hands right now to go back to your client and say, give us 15 units for workforce out of how many here?
Out of 550?
550 units.
30% of 550, since the new commissioner thought 30% is a good number, which I think may be a little too high.
Imagine if you can.
I've tried to respond as best I can. I understand the committee's interest. At this point, I really don't have more to add.
Okay, and I'm going to push as hard as I can to make this happen, but obviously legally we can only go so far, and I respect that opinion.
Well, can we deny or can we grant the appeal by Mr. Rex Frankel?
Let's ask our attorney for that.
On the appeal by Mr. Rex Frankel. Is Mr. Frankel here? Mr. Frankel, thank you. There's an appeal filed by Mr. Frankel on this particular project. Yes. Can we agree with him on the appeal and deny the request on the grounds of the appeal?
Terry Kaufman, Messia, City Attorney's Office. You have to have substantial evidence to support your decision. It cannot be based on the housing issue that's been discussed for a variety of reasons, which I would just like to state. One is that in order to impose conditions on a project, generally, whether you're looking at housing or otherwise, you have to have a nexus.
But that wasn't the reason for the appeal.
No,
the appeal is regarding the height and the restriction of visibility, as I recall.
And he does state illegal piecemealing because of the project has incrementally increased adverse impacts with no provisions to the original 1984 EIR. He does make that legal assertion, doesn't he?
Did you want to address that?
I'm just up here just in case you need anything.
Back up.
But what you need, Terry Kaufman Macias, but what you need to look at is what did the environmental analysis conclude on that, and then you need to make your determination based on substantial evidence in light of the whole record. You need to base your findings of denial under the Subdivision Map Act, the findings stated in 66474.
When it's asserted that the project did not contain an 18-story tower on the proposed site and contained a 4-story building on the site, now proposed for a 7-story tower, the EIR found that high rises on the site would create significant adverse visual impacts. Is there any basis for that?
Maya Zaitsevsky Planning, I was the advisory agency on this case. We did a review of the previous EIR, and then we tiered a mitigated negative declaration for this project, which was the track map and the apartment building. And we found that there was no new significant impacts. It would have previously led to a significant impact of use, which is something that we don't protect at this point in time in the city.
It's not, views are not protected under state law in California.
I don't know if we did a new EIR that would be something that would even come under consideration, but the aesthetics of the building would be. We didn't find that there was anything significant new information in the record brought by Mr. Frankel to deny the track map.
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. The other issue is that denial of a subdivision for condos can't be based on design or location of the building under the Subdivision Map Act Section 66427.
There's no legal basis for that?
I don't see any, no.
Okay. I guess the nature of this conversation right now is a reflection of, for me, a sense of disappointment that here we're being asked to allow for a development, and we're asking for a development to consider the needs of the city, and that's been rejected, and I'm being told legally we can't do anything about that.
Well, if what you're speaking of, Councilmember Reyes, is the issue of affordable or workforce housing, you know, as you know, we've advised many times, and it's well known legal opinion that you have to have a nexus to impose those conditions. We have a development agreement here that did not include at that time anything related to.
Madam Attorney, I understand that, and I've been told that several times, and I'm just voicing for the record that we have the attorney here, we have the beneficiary of our actions that's going to generate over 500 units of housing with who knows how much in return for that entity. And I give him a lot of credit for the improvements that have already been identified in the agreement. That's not being dismissed at all. But I also know that the changes in the airspace, the entitlements, the reconfiguration of their property is going to be there's going to be a very handsome return there. And that is pretty obvious. But the fact that the attorney chooses to ignore or does not feel compelled to respond to a real need in the city is very disappointing. And that to me is what we need to change in policy, and hoping we have enough votes to get there eventually in this city. So I appreciate what you're saying. I know we have to have a legal nexus. I understand the toughness that we're in, the tough situation we're in, but I also understand the evident, how could I say this, cavalier posture of, well, we just don't want to do it.
Well,
the agreement doesn't call for it. It wasn't part of the agreement, so we don't have to do it. And that's what's being said.
Well, what I actually heard, Terry Kaufman, CS, again, is that there will be an amendment, it's contemplated, to the development agreement, and that will be the time, I think from Mr. Abshah's comments, that your message was loud and clear, and I think they're going to consider that very seriously when the development agreement is amended and comes before you again. That will be a discretionary approval, and at that time, you will have an opportunity to address this issue and exchange development rights for public benefits, including housing. So I do think that it seems like it is going to occur.
Councilman Zong.
I've got issues with the fact it's been 23 years since this process started. In 23 years, that entire area has changed. The congestion in the area, the concentration of business and housing in the area over the last 23 years has made a significant change. And listening to the representative, it sounds like there may be other options regardless of the housing component of 550 units that they want to meet. They want to have the entitlement, but the economic situation doesn't dictate now to do this project. So they may come back with a revised project, which may have commercial and not so many residential. So it's kind of like up in the air. Let's get our entitlement and let's move forward. But in reality, it's not going to happen. And it's been 23 years and nothing's happened. So I have a concern about the reality of granting when I think the appeal has some merit. The fact is, in 23 years, nothing's been done, and it may be another 5 or 6 or 7 years until the economy turns around, or this may change into another development, which 23 years is behind us, and nothing's been done during that period of time.
May I say something about
Sure.
Maya Zaitsevsky? There has been progress made on the site. This is the Howard Hughes site where there's office buildings, there's the shopping center that's been built, so it's not like nothing has happened on the site.
I'm talking about this particular aspect of it.
This particular parcel, 2 parcels, nothing has been built on.
Right,
but
that's what
overall,
I'm saying.
so there's been a lot of commercial office space and retail development, and what they're trying to do is bring that jobs housing balance that you were talking about to this particular large parcel that's convenient to the freeway and add housing. So that's what's before.
Well, I understand the jobs housing. I just don't see the balance part. I see the jobs there, I see the housing, but I don't see it balanced, and that's the issue that there's a concern. And I'm familiar with that area. I've been shopped at that. I even shopped at that, some of the stores there, so I'm familiar with it. But this particular 23-year wait on these particular vacant parcels, again, it may turn into something different. With the council office, is the council office here on this particular matter? Can you come up and address this particular issue? And what the councilman's direction is, or input, suggestions?
Sure. Whitney Blumenfeld for Councilman Bill Rosendahl. I believe you're asking me if he has had any further discussions with me about affordable housing on the current project as it is proposed, correct?
That, and is this actually a project that's going to complete, or is there other opportunities for other commercial or other industrial, or is this geared for residential?
To my knowledge, the community has asked for a market possibly and senior housing, and my understanding is that the current development agreement does not permit that, and as a result we have been in conversations with the developer to come back and change it so there is affordable senior housing and senior housing in this development. I know they have been in contact with a senior affordable housing developer who has come to my office, and the site did not work for him. In terms of whether or not affordable housing in the current project, I believe is your other question, my boss talked with the city attorney and understands in terms of how much he can and can't push.
What would be his decision if he could push?
If he could legally push, I have heard him say that he likes housing in general because there are more units and then there's more people that can live in different units. If he had the right to say more affordable housing, and that it was legally permissible, then he would want affordable housing.
But what it may turn into is a market, possibly, because there are no markets in that immediate area. So
I believe with some of the office, I believe, or ground floor, correct? I don't know if there's room for a market, though.
But the bottom line is that as a result of our legal limitations, you have 550 units, 225 are apartment that will be market rate, and 225 condos will be market rate. Given that I don't see any movement at all for any type of affordability, whether it's seniors or workforce, then that's something that looks like we have to live with, given the legal limitations that we have. He is aware of that?
He is.
Okay. Well, make him aware that we did try to convince the attorney and the representatives to show a little bit more compassion on this scenario, knowing that they made a commitment to consider future scenarios, which is great, but really is just a consideration at this time.
Correct.
There's nothing legally binding to it, which puts us in a very weak place. And that's unfortunate, because if anywhere that the city needs affordability is in the west side, as your council member already knows. And we have a great opportunity here that we're going to miss. So I grudgingly would have to, given that we don't have any real legal basis to deal with location and or view sheds, to deny the appeal.
Well, I look at it differently. There's an appeal been filed. There's issues that have changed in 23 years. And I don't know why that appeal wouldn't have merit on the grounds of the situation that the appellate, regardless of this other conversation, that the man who's filed, Mr. Frankel, we haven't heard from him regarding this particular matter. Why wouldn't there be any merit in that? Or has that already been explored and dismissed?
Terry Kaufman, Macias City Attorney's Office, that's a question of facts and findings. That's a different issue than what Councilmember Reyes was.
I would support Councilmember Zine's effort if I knew we could have something to stand on. What you're saying is that we don't.
Well, that's what I'm trying to find out. We have a changing area from 23 years ago when this process started. Well, there's been other developments in that area. These lots remain vacant, and the allegations by the appellant, have they all been dismissed as having no merit? Or are there any merits to any of the allegations raised by the appellant, Mr. Frankel?
Would you like me to answer that?
Well, you may
Or
want
anyone else?
to also call staff back up to address that.
Sure. I can say that from my aspect, my work, that I met with the city attorney to review any and each of all of the allegations to make sure there wasn't anything that we were missing. And to my knowledge and to my understanding, based on 2 to 3 discussions with the city attorney, we did not have something as a city to stand on.
I think, Terry Kaufman, Macias, I think those comments are relating to the environmental and what you're talking about, Councilmember Zine, that the city attorney did not find any defects in the document that would, in the environmental documents that would support the appeal.
Okay, I'm talking at all the allegations that were brought forward by the appellant.
Right.
Every single allegation was explored, and
Correct.
each allegation was dismissed.
Yeah, I went through with the city attorney in detail, a meeting and 2 follow-up phone conversations, because I wanted to make sure that I was comfortable enough that everything had been looked through in the record, and we weren't missing anything, and there wasn't anything that was done incorrectly that we could use. And based on that review, that was my determination.
So with that in mind, we have a hearing on a matter that we have no discretion to rule against. Is that correct? So why have the hearing?
No, Councilmember Zine, you have discretion. And you're the decision makers, this committee's the recommending body, and you have the MAP Act that sets forth the findings, you've got the evidence in the record, and then you have to make the decision.
And you're saying that the facts show that we can't rule against that?
What Ms. Blumenfeld was stating is that our office has looked at the issues. Your question was, were the issues raised in the appeal reviewed? Yes, they were. The city attorney's office did not, our CEQA attorneys did not find any merit, but of course, you are the decision makers.
So we can find merit where the city attorney can't find merit.
Based on the findings. Again, it's facts and findings. It has to be based on the findings set forth in the MAP Act and not on any lack of affordable or workforce housing.
No, I'm going on the appeal by Mr. Frankel and not other factors that have been discussed at this particular meeting or the previous meeting. And with those issues, and I'd like to hear from Mr. Frankel once again on the allegations that he has brought forward.
Thank you. Rex Frankel, is there a specific question you had to ask that I can answer for you?
Your allegations on why this is improper.
The issue here is that does the development agreement grant the applicant the right to build these units? And no, they're actually asking for a change. They have a right to build 600 apartment units, and they're seeking condominium units. One of the downsides of giving them the right to build condominiums is that they don't have, it's much harder to limit affordability with condominiums than with the existing right to build only apartments. What the applicant is attempting to do is get the approval to do something here. They're going to bank the permits. They'll start construction even if they don't have financing to complete them. That gives them vested rights, and that locks in their right to build all non-affordable units. So even if they try to amend the development agreement in 2 years, that will have no effect on the residential units that we're dealing with today. The piecemealing argument merely is that the original project never contained the 18-story or the 7-story tower in their locations. The site of the 7-story was only a 4-story building. The site of the 18-story building was open space and a roadway, and they have moved what was, the project was a wall of 3 high-rise buildings with the 4th high-rise building hidden behind the 3. And then another series of shorter 4-story, 4 to 5-story buildings on the other side of the project. And what the applicant has done is shift that 4th tall building into the area where you had shorter buildings, thereby wiping out entirely the view shed of a neighborhood of 1,000 homes. That's the visual impacts issue that we're raising. And so is the project consistent today with the project that was in the EIR in 1984? And the answer is no. And that's why you have very good reasons to say that the project has changed in significant measure from the project that exists on the books. And my attorney would be glad to draft findings. Actually, if the city attorney doesn't have them, I'd be glad to come up with something for you that would be more sufficient to support a decision to support our appeal today.
Council members, Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. I have 2 comments. The comments that Mr. Frankel made regarding the development agreement are simply incorrect. I don't think I need to repeat, but if a new development, if the development agreement is going to be amended, there's negotiation that takes place. It's discretionary, and if you want to work out an agreement with the developer over that and housing, that's the time to do that. I do have Mr. Shu here from our office. He's a CEQA attorney, and if you have questions regarding the environmental analysis that was conducted, he would be happy to answer them for you. It seems like you may want to hear that.
I do, but
Okay.
what we just heard you're saying is inaccurate?
Yes, about the development agreement. That isn't even that's not in front of you today. The only thing that's in front of you today is it's a division of airspace. That's the only thing. And there is the apartment buildings. You cannot under Costa-Hawkins, you can't set the rates. Local government cannot set the rates of rent. That's the problem
We're
with that.
beyond the rates. We're beyond the affordable aspect. Now we're trying to determine if, in fact, there's any grounds to the appeal.
That's right.
By Mr. Frankel.
That's right.
And the question is, he describes how it was originally planned, and then buildings were switched around. Now, if that is an issue that grants an appeal, that's an issue that I think may have merit.
Well, if you would like to hear from our CEQA attorney, Mr. Shu is here, and he'd be happy to answer that because he looked at the issues that Mr. Frankel raised in detail.
That'd be fine.
City Attorney Shu?
Good afternoon, Sigmund Scher, Deputy City Attorney. Based on our review of the documents, what occurred is in 1986 when Council granted the approvals for the track map, it did not include the location of the building that is going to be the condo unit at the current location that it is today, and that is what was approved in 1986. Subsequent to 1986, that building was moved through a track map modification.
This is 1986, you're saying?
The approvals were 1986, that's correct.
And then you're saying that in 96, did I hear you correctly?
No, in 92, there was a modification of the track map.
A modification.
And that modification did move the building to its current location.
It did.
And then in 1994, Council approved the final map, which granted the entitlement to build at that location. Now, the entitlement that was granted in 1994 was for an apartment building. After the 1994 track map was finalized by Council and then recorded by the developer, at that point the developer had the right to develop an apartment building, residential apartment building at that location. Under CEQA, the baseline then would be that apartment building and the right to build that apartment building. The discretionary approval before us today is the vesting tenure track map for condo units of the Division of Airspace.
So if we don't approve it, all he has is apartments then?
Well, if we deny the track map, they will not have the right to subdivide the airspace, that is correct. But under strictly looking at the environmental aspects of it, the change in the project that we're analyzing is basically the division of airspace. It's not the location of the building, which has already been analyzed and approved by.
But my question to you is, do we have to approve what they're requesting?
Parking is different from a condo than an apartment. If you're changing it, there's got to be other modifications. And the question is, if it was designed as an apartment, and now it's being transferred over to a condo, there's certain conditions on the condo versus an apartment.
But the issue, Terry Kaufman Macias, the issue for that Mr. Frankel raised is the location of the building. And what Mr. Hsu is saying is that location, the change in the location, was already reviewed, analyzed, and approved before.
Now today we're talking about going from an apartment to a condo.
That's right, but okay. Mr. Frankel's appeal is based on the fact that in his opinion, this building has moved, and the building hasn't moved. The footprint of the building, it hasn't moved. So the only thing that's different as far as would it impact the view, and again, there's no right to a view in California, if you are renting these units out versus selling them, whether it's ownership versus rental.
Right.
And
but there's different conditions on an apartment requirement versus a condo requirement.
An apartment building would be by right. So, but the conditions that you impose on a map under the MAP Act relate to design and improvement. Again, not the improvement relates to streets and driveways and things of that nature, alleys, not the type of design that is how the building looks aesthetically. That under the MAP Act, city is prohibited from denying a map or imposing conditions related to that. So while the council always holds the ultimate discretion, still you have to have substantial evidence in the record to base your decision on. And I think what Mr. Hsu is saying, that the problem that Mr. Frankel perceives has already been identified, and there's no other substantial evidence in the record that would support the appeal.
Other than the fact that it's being converted or being requested to convert from apartment to a condo.
Right, but I'm not sure that has any kind of an environmental impact.
It does, because there's different requirements for condos and apartments. There's different parking requirements.
No, the physical structure is the same. You're looking at a physical structure under CEQA, and that's the same. That doesn't change when what you're changing is
is
How about the
simply
parking?
ownership.
The parking requirements are different, Mr. Shu, on the requirements for apartment versus condo. There's a difference in the parking requirements. You have to have a different number of cars for one versus the other. Maybe someone from planning can know the number.
Ms. Lizevsky could come up to the podium and respond to that.
The difference between a parking requirement for a condo development and an apartment development?
The advisory agency has a policy that requires guest parking, which is not required in apartments. So this project, the condominium tower, did comply with our guest parking policy.
So they are meeting all the
But I
requirements?
don't know that that relates to any environmental impacts other than reducing on-site, off-site parking impacts.
There's no overflow impact?
I'm sorry?
There's no overflow impact because of this new facility?
There's congestion, more cars, more congestion.
Well,
It does have an
having
impact.
parking spaces doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have more cars.
Well, and I think the issue that we'd be looking at, Vince Bertoni, Deputy Director, would be the difference in congestion between apartments and condominiums, I believe, not between condos and no project, if you will. My memory of looking at traffic studies is that actually apartments typically generate more traffic than condos. So going from apartment to condo, this is off the top of my head, is all the traffic studies I've seen say actually be less traffic.
But I'm talking about parking requirements. If you have senior housing, you don't need as much parking. If you have an apartment building, the requirements are different than a condo, and it's different than a senior project.
Correct, and I think what Ms. Lizevsky is saying is that by policy we require more guest parking for condos, and this project meets that policy.
On the conversion.
Right.
And that's what we're discussing, the conversion from apartment to condo. That's what we're talking about.
Conversion of apartment to condo is a different thing. This is not an existing building, it's a vacant lot, and so the development agreement, he's saying it did allow for condominiums, and I can't say she has a copy of it. But apartments versus condominiums, I think Vince is correct. The DOT, when they do traffic studies, actually have a higher trip generation rate for apartments than they do for condominiums. I couldn't speak to why, but I think that's a sort of an ITE a standard that they generate more trips. So
I'm not talking about the trips. I'm talking about the number of spaces you need.
Councilmember Zine, excuse me for interrupting. Terry Copham, Messia, City Attorney's Office. There was an addendum that was certified in 2005, and that addendum referenced the units and analyzed the units as either condominiums or apartments. So that has already been analyzed. And again, and Mr. Shu can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're analyzing an impact of a project, you're not analyzing the impact of what the project could be. If there was an alternative project, you're looking at the existing conditions and what the impact of this project would be. So really the fact that one is apartments and one is condos, number one, it's already been analyzed, and number two, Mr. Bertoni, the Deputy Director of Planning, has stated his understanding that apartments actually generate more traffic, and again, all you're doing here is analyzing airspace. So,
Well, I still don't think that what is being proposed from 23 years ago deals with the current standards of today regarding airspace, regarding congestion, regarding issues that may fall into Mr. Frankel's appeal.
Maya Zaitsevsky, as far as the development agreement, one of the things that they had to do was do all their physical traffic improvements up front. The majority of them happened with the first phase of the Howard Hughes development. And then I think in 1992, what Mr. Shu was talking about with the realignment of Center Drive, that happened. It was not appealed, that's modification to the map. It wasn't appealed by Mr. Frankel.
Right.
So the location moved from one spot to another. This was done because of Caltrans requirements and DOT requirements regarding the street. So the building was shifted at that point in time with no appeal, no lawsuit filed on that. So what we're looking at is Their traffic improvements have been done. The building was shifted because of certain reasons at the time. It's not before us now. We can't put the building in a street right now. We can't move the street. That would have more impacts. To try to relocate it to an area where he thinks it would cause less impacts, you're not going to realign Center Drive to move the building to where it was previously located in the EIR in 1986. They've done their improvements. They have done the park. It just...
the improvements were done when? The traffic improvements?
They started doing them when the construction began, and they were required to do the majority of them up front because it is such a big concern from neighborhood groups that, you know, they know there'll be this ultimate build out, but they like to see the big, you know, relief mechanisms built into the beginning of projects. So there's an upfront expense that the developer put into the project to alleviate traffic concerns, you know, the freeway off-ramp. And then what they've been doing too is that they have a traffic, I think she came to the last hearing, but they have a TDM manager on site who does coordinates, you know, they have a dash and a commuter express that comes to the site. They have major bus lines that go there, and they have an active participating, you know, group of people in the buildings that are there right now that use public transportation to reduce their impact. And so what she said at our public hearings was that, you know, there was a goal set for their traffic demand management that they would reduce the trips by a certain percentage, and I can't tell you off the top of my head what it was, but they had exceeded their requirement, and that's because they have such a good, you know, on-site manager there who's very active in coordinating with all the, you know, the businesses in the area with the major developments that are in that area.
And I realize what you're saying, but there's also an assertion here, and I want to explore this a little bit more, in that the Hughes Center applicant claims that a 2002 development agreement amendment was written to exempt a separate part of the Hughes Center from paying $5 million in city traffic fees. The amendment was done with a CEQA categorical exemption. However, the applicant now claims that the 2002 amendment occurred with an EIR approved by the council on September 4, 2002, yet we don't show any record of the council's action. Do we have any?
I had no part in what happened in 2002 with those amendments. He's said that to me, but it really, I don't know what the relevance is to the hearing we're having today.
Council
you
members,
can't go back and change
Chair
things.
Coughlin, Macias City Attorney's Office. Those issues aren't in front of you today. When an approval goes forward, if it's not challenged, it's deemed valid. It's res judicata, just as if an administrative decision, just as if you went to court, got a judgment, and someone tried to come back later and attack the judgment. So those things have already been determined. The statute of limitations has run, and
it has.
And
on the 2002 development agreement?
Yes, all of those. Those are the rules that, it's a 90-day statute of limitations on the amendment to development
90
agreement.
days.
So
is that a state law? The 90
yes,
days?
Government Code 65009. So, you know, I understand that there's a you know, discomfort here, but the fact of the matter is that while there is discretion, it's very, very narrow in this case because of the analysis that's been done and the prior approvals that have been done, state law, and you know, I don't know what else I can say about it. So,
well,
you're saying this is irrelevant, what I just said? That's an assertion that there is no record of a council action for
yes,
what
because
occurred?
whatever actions have occurred in the past, it's too late to change that now. If there was a problem with that back then, it's done.
How about to verify that it actually took place?
That doesn't have anything to do with the findings under the MAP Act, which you're limited to, and the fact that what you're looking at, again, is division of airspace.
Well, 550 units will generate over 1,000 cars. And if you ever drive the 405 freeway down to LAX, 1,000 more cars is just another half-hour delay.
Well, actually, the development agreement was for 600 units, and again, that was already analyzed.
Back in '86?
No, the addendum is 2005.
Councilmember Zion, what if we don't act on this? It just goes forward to council without a recommendation.
Yes.
And that way we can give the reasons.
And then we can explain why we don't support it.
Right. We just move forward, let it go to council without a recommendation. Because I'm still holding on to that one last string of hope that just maybe the 550 units will be reconsidered for workforce housing, knowing there's no legal basis for it, knowing that we have the California law against us, and knowing that they have previous agreements that they could stand on, which is their right. But I still don't feel comfortable doing this, and I would consider moving this forward without recommendations, and I will state why. I'll make it very clear that this developer is being very strategic and opportunistic with what they have gained today, and that we're relying on future commitments when there's no real binding commitment. It's just goodwill and good faith, which is not being shown right now. So what makes you think it's going to be shown later?
Will there be other approvals required before they move forward with any building?
Need a building permit.
Councilman, I think we should just move the recommendation. And
I support the recommendation, but before you sit down, other reviews and approvals?
Yeah, Maya Zaitsevsky, they have a total of 4 parcels that have not been developed, and the tract map covers 2 of the lots, lot 1 and 2. There's 2 other lots that are not subject to the tract map that have 2 commercial buildings proposed on them, and what they have is a conditional use permit to allow FAR averaging, floor area ratio averaging of the at the site. So between the 4 buildings, they have that. I approved that, and it's been appealed to the West LA Area Planning Commission. I think it's going to be heard in January.
So we will see this again in this committee?
No, because it's not further appealable unless Section 245 by the council office. It's not further appealable. There's only one level of appeal.
The full project, will it come before this committee?
It's 2 separate paths based on the charter. One's a ZA portion and one's an advisory agency portion.
Were there any other conditions that would bring any of the development for residential before this committee in the future?
It shouldn't. It could if it's Section 245 or if he just said a CEQA appeal on that.
But no other formal approval that would be required?
And that's not a residential portion. It's just a commercial. It's for residential and commercial. Yeah, you can try again, I guess.
Okay, thank you. So I will support the no recommendation on the matter.
That will be the action of this committee. Okay, Roberto, next.
The next item, Councilman, is item 12. It's the last item. It's an appeal by Andrew Schwartz from the Hollywood Heritage Inc. and also Robert Blue and Doug Haynes from the Lomrod Avenue Neighborhood Association. This relates to the construction of a Target store in City 13.
Now this has been continued for 6 months. We have several speaker cards and they felt compelled to speak, so we'll call them up. Daniel Wright, then we'll have Ziggy Cruz, Doug Haynes, Aaron Epstein, and Richard Potkin. Please.
Good day, honorable council members. Daniel Wright of the Silverstein Law Firm at 215 North Marengo, Pasadena 91101, on behalf of the Lomrod Avenue Neighborhood Association of Hollywood. Director Gail Goldberg once observed that the crazy thing about Los Angeles was that land values between buyers and sellers is based upon not the assigned zoning, but what the variances and exceptions to the zoning that the buyer believes he can extract from the city. This is a sad commentary on the city, which is perceived in the development community as subject to getting anything they want. This concept applies here, where the Target Corporation seeks to only maximize its profits by continuing to refuse to construct a building with underground parking. It will construct a block-long building almost 80 feet instead of the specific plan limit of 35 feet. This is not a niggling little difference for which a small exception is sought. It is a proposed wholesale abandonment of the concept of zoning in the city of Los Angeles. Target Corporation knows it has a legally insufficient mitigated negative declaration, and this 6-month continuance is presumably for the purpose of preparing or recasting the MND as an EIR. I would encourage this committee to urge Councilmember Garcetti that the EIR process is an opportunity to bring this project into compliance with the zoning and bring the community into the process with the goal of getting a project that everyone can support. The city will have difficulty justifying findings of overriding considerations for an EIR to approve this same project just with an EIR. Now is the time for leadership from the council office to change this project to bring it into compliance with a specific plan that expresses the land use values of the community and supposedly the city as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ziggy Cruz.
Good afternoon. My name is Ziggy Cruz, and I'm here today on behalf of Robert Brew, representing him since he couldn't take off from work. One of Mr. Blue's appeals points is that this project does not include residential units, and the height variance should not be granted, since it would set a terrible example for any future project in this area. On a side note, if the height is granted, it will obstruct the views of the people, of the view of Griffith Park and the observatory, the Hollywood sign, and anything else in the way. One very important point that Mr. Blue wants to bring out is the weak outreach that the applicant has had and the non-responsiveness to suggestions. Mr. Blue attended the Council District 13's Design Review Committee meeting on December 13th, 2007. The members of the DRC are handpicked by CD13 and are distinguished architects, planners, and designers with a diversity of backgrounds. This was the second presentation given to the DRC. The committee members expressed frustration, with one member starting to say that you didn't change anything since our first meeting. The meeting minutes reflect the summary of the documents, which I believe Mr. Blue had submitted with this appeal. Lastly, Mr. Blue also pointed out that the neighboring neighborhood councils were part of the Hollywood Studio District, but across the street is the East Hollywood Neighborhood Council. In the beginning, the applicant never reached out to them, even though they're pretty much touching the borders, which shows a utter disrespect of the applicant's behalf in that respect. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Doug Haynes. Aaron Epstein.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Doug Haynes with the Lomrod Avenue Neighborhood Association. And I'll be real brief. There are just a few things that really concern us on this project that we've tried to express to Target and also the city. The height, the traffic issues, and conformance with the specific plan. And the reason the specific plan is so important is, as an example, I'm a member of the East Hollywood Neighborhood Council and also its planning committee. And we just recently had another application come forward to us for another building that ignores the specific plan. It would be next to Barnesdale Park. There's a 35-foot height limitation. They're saying they want to go 85 feet. So basically, once you open the floodgates, what's the point of even having this plan? It's only 9 years old. It was designed by the community for the future of Hollywood because we want to preserve what little we have. And that's the whole gist of this. I also want to point out that what we stated last time, the agenda is incorrect in its statement that Hollywood Heritage is an appellant. In this case, it's Andrew Schwartz by a self-resident individual. Thank you very much.
Aaron Epstein.
Thank you. I have some concerns about the procedures for public comment at these hearings and agenda items. This is the third time I've come down here expecting discussions on this Target store. The first time somebody told me about it. The second time I made it a point to look at the agenda and I saw that it was on the agenda and I came down only to find out it's been postponed. So the third time I thought, okay, I'm going to wise up. I called up Patrice Lattimore's office yesterday. They told me she'd be in today. I did talk to her this morning, asking if it was going to be on the agenda, and she says it is on the agenda, but sometimes they're postponed, that I should call the councilman's office. I then called Councilman Garcetti's office. I was told I should talk to a lady named Kate Honeycutt, And they said, okay, I asked for her, but she was out to lunch. So I take the subway from North Hollywood, and when I get on the subway, I don't know if this is going to be heard or not. There has to be a better system for letting the public know whether something's going to be on the agenda or not. I don't know if you have any way of solving this dilemma for us or not.
Well, my deepest apologies, sir. There are times, though, when a council office and or the developer and or the applicant, the appellant, might have a technical issue or need more time to have more discussion before we have it before a committee, and it could happen as soon as 10 minutes before the committee.
Yeah,
and so that's hard to control.
It's strange, though, because the people that have concerns about this are here, but the target people are not. How do they find out it's being postponed?
Evidently, there was some understanding between the applicant and the council office, because that's the message we got in our committee.
I hope that some procedure is changed so that the general public is treated equally as with other people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. What's your problem?
I'm Dick Platkin, a city planning consultant, former city planner who left before there was a golden handshake, I might add.
Before the E-Rep.
Okay. I've already submitted testimony. I have expanded my testimony from before, which you should have in front of you, to address three arguments recently made on October 5th by Target. The first is that they argue the plan supports flexibility, and therefore flexibility means they should be able to bust through the height limits to add another 39 feet onto the building. I would argue that they cannot make a proper finding by arguing flexibility. Flexibility is in the context of the plan, and it doesn't give you an exemption to kind of circumvent the plan, and they still have the burden of proof on them. The second point addresses the unusual nature of this plan. Most plans have design guidelines which are only adopted by the City Planning Commission. This plan has design guidelines which have been adopted by the City Council as an ordinance, and furthermore, this plan has, the design guidelines have 6 separate findings. So 5 of the 8 exemptions that they have requested require 6 additional findings, or 30 findings, which they have failed to meet, and some of these findings are extremely onerous, such as being consistent with the character of the surrounding community. The burden of proof is on Target to argue, not assert, that they are within conform to the height limits and the character of the surrounding community. And the final argument that Target makes is that their business model requires them to build a 75-foot tower as part of their store. And as you should know, in section Well, anyway, there is no exemption for a business model. They have to conform to the regular findings that are required.
And your observations have been written?
Yes, they're written, and I submitted them today in writing.
Great. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, Councilman, just to respond to the previous speaker's comment, the appeal by Andrew Schwartz does state that it's on behalf of Hollywood Heritage Incorporated. That's why it continues to appear that way on the agenda.
Okay. All right. So that being said, we will hear this in 6 months. And anybody here for public comment? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Look at that. Should raise your hand quicker, Daniel. All right.
I thought you were going to run out of the room.
Okay.
Daniel Wright, 467 Crane Boulevard. This is my neighborhood hat. I just wanted to bring to your attention, Councilman Reyes, because I know that you were involved from a very early time on these issues involving both application fees for development and appeal fees. And as you know, I was a strong advocate about raising concerns about how much the community really knew about these appeal fees that came before council. And we greatly appreciate council's hearing the community and putting the fees back for the time being. I just wanted to make you aware that we haven't heard of anything from the city planning department yet, nothing. And we would be, I know that our organization in your community in Mount Washington are anxious to work with the city to have a real discussion about how to best handle appeal fees in these challenging economic times. So I hope that we can open a dialogue and also just kind of find out, or if your staff could help find out what is going on with the planning department in terms of coming back and revisiting the appeal fee issue. Thank you.
I appreciate bringing that up. Being the holidays are right around the corner, don't expect it to happen at any time soon, the next 2 weeks. And we have a few small items in front of us right now that we're trying to resolve. But we're going to get to them. But I appreciate the heads up.
All right, so I'll follow up with your staff as well, because we would like to meet.
It'll happen the next couple of months. We'll get to them.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. This meeting now adjourned.